dear ones, welcome back to Plus One channel. What's going on? Hey, after reading the chapter I Will Fly, now all knows how to be unique, right? So today I am going to introduce you one unique personality.
Stephen was born on January 8, 1942.
It's a boy.
These are my sisters, Mary and Philip. My parents are Frank and Isabel.
I didn't do so well academically and fell behind on homework at St. Albans School and Oxford University and didn't do my best.
Then one day I fell mysteriously ill.
You have ALS, which will paralyze you and make it hard for you to breathe, eat, and talk. Plus most patients die within 1 to 2 years with the disease.
But after being diagnosed with ALS, I met Jane at a party in 1963 and asked her on a date and she said,
Yes.
And we got married on July 14, 1965. We had a baby boy named Robert and was born in 1967.
I had a baby girl named Lucy. And Stephen was moved to a wheelchair around this time. One day we got someone to help take care of Stephen. And had another child named Timothy who was born in 1979.
What are you doing, Stephen?
I am writing a book with my computer and it is called A Brief History in Time.
Stephen, I want a divorce. I don't think I can go on having to live like this with you.
Then my dad died in 1986. But eventually lost my ability to speak.
But I had a solution. I'm going to program a computer to use my cheek movements and transfer them as words through a computer in my wheelchair. So, I received my Albert Einstein Award in 1978, and received the Cosmos Award in 2010.
Stephen Hawking has inspired me because he was diagnosed with ALS and was going to die in 2 years. He also lost the ability to move, breathe, write, and eat. But he still got married, wrote a book, and accomplished more things than a regular person would. This shows that even with his disabilities, he never gave up and did a lot with his life and is still doing a lot.
Welcome back. Now one question. Can a person be judged by appearance alone? Anyways, after reading this chapter, you won't judge like that. So take your textbook and read with me.
A quest for a theory of everything. In the Cockcroft lecture room on April 29, 1980, Scientists and university dignitaries gathered in steep tiers of seats facing a two-story wall of chalkboard and slide screen. The occasion was the inaugural lecture by a new Lucasian professor of mathematics, the 38-year-old mathematician and physicist Stephen Hawking. The title of the lecture was a question: Is the end in sight for theoretical physics? Hawking startled his listeners by announcing that he thought it was. He invited them to join him in a sensational escape through time and space to find the holy grail of science, the theory that explains the universe and everything that happens in it. Stephen Hawking sat silently in a wheelchair while one of his students read his lecture to the assembled company. Judged by appearance alone, Hawking didn't seem a promising choice to lead any adventure. Underline it. Stephen William Hawking was born on 8 January 1942 in Oxford, England. It was exactly 300 years after the death of Galileo, the father of modern science. His parents were Frank and Isabel Ellen Hawking. Isabel worked as a secretary for a medical research institute, and Frank was a medical researcher. Despite their family's financial constraints, both parents attended the University of Oxford, where Frank studied medicine and Isabel studied philosophy, politics, and economics. Frank and Isabel Hawking, Stephen's parents were not wealthy, but they believed in the value of education. Underline it. So they planned for Stephen to go to Westminster, a famous public school in the heart of London. Unfortunately, Stephen was ill at the time of the scholarship examination for Westminster. Therefore, he attended the local St. Albans school. By the time he was 8, he was thinking seriously about becoming a scientist. Frank Hawking encouraged his son to follow him into medicine, but Stephen found biology too imprecise. He wanted a subject in which he could look for exact answers and get to the root of things. Young Stephen was no prodigy. He was just an ordinary English schoolboy, slow in learning to read, his handwriting the despair of his teachers. He was ranked no more than halfway up in his class, though he now says in his own defense it was a very bright class. At 14, Stephen knew that he would pursue mathematics and physics. His father called this impractical, for there were no jobs in mathematics except teaching. Moreover, he wanted his son to attend his own college, and Oxford offered no mathematics. He followed his father's advice and studied chemistry, physics, and a little mathematics in preparation for the entrance into Oxford. He did well in physics, and the interview was brilliantly accepted. In 1959, at the age of 17, Hawking went to Oxford to study natural science and to specialize in physics. He joined University College, his father's college, and the oldest at Oxford, founded in 1249 AD. Nevertheless, for about a year and a half, Hawking was lonely and bored. He was not inspired to relieve his boredom by exerting himself academically. But halfway through his second year, he began enjoying Oxford. He became popular and well accepted among his peers. They remember him as lively, buoyant, and adaptable. Wore his hair long, was famous for his wit, liked classical music and science fiction, and took part in sports. However, at the end of the third year, Hawking almost flaunted. He selected theoretical physics as his specialty. He had then applied to do a PhD at Cambridge and was accepted on condition that he got a first from Oxford. Hawking was confident that he could get through successfully, but as the examination day approached, his confidence failed. Hawking ended up disastrously on the borderline between a first and a second. Faced with a borderline result, the examiners summoned Hawking for an interview and questioned him about his plans. In spite of the tenseness of the situation, Hawking managed to come up with a remark for which he was famous among his friends. "If I get a first, I shall go to Cambridge. If I receive a second, I will remain at Oxford. So I expect that you will give me a first. He got his first and he went to Cambridge. His first year at Cambridge was worse than that at Oxford. Slipshod mathematical background caught up with him, and he found general relativity extremely tough. Another far more disastrous problem arose then. During his third year at Oxford, Hawking started getting clumsy. He had fallen once or twice for no apparent reason. The following autumn at Cambridge, he had trouble tying his shoe and sometimes he had difficulty talking. Shortly after his 21st birthday in 1963, Hawking contracted a rare disease, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, for which there was no known cure. It caused a gradual disintegration of the nerve cells in the spinal cord and the brain underlying it. At first, he went into a deep depression. He did not know what he ought to do or what his future would be like. My dreams at that time were rather confused, he admitted. Before my condition was diagnosed, I had been very bored with life. There did not seem to be anything worth doing, but shortly after I came out of hospital, I dreamed that I was going to be executed. I suddenly realized that there were a lot of worthwhile things to do if I were reprieved. Another recurring dream was the idea of sacrificing my life to save others. After all, if I were going to die, I might as well do some good. Hawking's doctor hoped that his condition would stabilize, but the disease aggravated rapidly. They soon informed him that he had only about 2 more years to live. 2 years passed. The progression of the disease had slowed. I didn't die. In fact, although there was a cloud hanging over my future, I found to my surprise that I was enjoying life in the present more than before. Total disability and death, though still a not too distant certainty, were postponed. Hawking had his reprieve, a precarious and a temporary one, but life was precious. At a New Year party at St. Albans, just before he entered the hospital for tests, Hawking met Jane Wilde, underlining it. To her, this disheveled graduate student seemed terribly intelligent, eccentric and rather arrogant, but he was interesting and she liked his wit. When Jane met him again after his discharge from the hospital, he was really in a pathetic state. I think he's lost his will to live. He was very confused, she commented. She was not, however, put off by his physical or mental condition. She was rather a shy teenager, serious-minded, with a strong faith in God, ingrained from childhood by her mother, and the belief that good can come out of any adversity. Hawking admired her optimism and their friendship developed slowly. After a while, the two began, in Jane's words, that together we could make something worthwhile. For Stephen, that made all the difference. He applied for a research fellowship at Case, one of the colleges in Cambridge University. In 1965, at the age of 23, Hawking received his fellowship at Case, and in July of the same year, Jane and he were married. People who remember Hawking in the university in the late 1960s recall him making his way around the corridors with a cane, supporting himself against the wall. He spoke with what sounded like a slight speech impediment, but more than that, they remember his brashness in sessions involving some of the world's most distinguished scientists. While other young researchers kept a reverential silence, Hawking daringly asked unexpected and penetrating questions. He clearly knew what he was talking about. His reputation as a genius, another Einstein, began then. In 1980, a practical need for funds launched him into a new enterprise that was to have a far-reaching impact on the Hawkings and others all over the world. He thought of writing a book about the universe, about the most interesting question that had made him want to study cosmology and quantum theory. Where did the universe come from? Is the universe infinite or does it have any boundaries? Will it come to an end? If so, how? Is there a complete theory of the universe and everything in it? Is there a beginning of time? Could time run back? The book begins by rewinding the great theories of the cosmos from Newton to Einstein. He wrote the book to make science understandable to non-scientists. He completed the first draft in 1984. While the revision process was going on, he made a trip to Switzerland. There he was down with pneumonia and was left on a life support system. Doctors gave a choice as to whether a tracheotomy operation, which would remove his windpipe, should be conducted or not. It might save his life, but afterwards he would never again be able to speak or make a vocal sound. With grave misgivings, Jane consented. The future looked very bleak, Jane remarked. Hawking could no longer breathe through his mouth and nose, but only through a permanent opening made in his throat. After many weeks of intensive care, he went home to join Jane and his 3 children. He was still too weak and ill to continue his research. Walt Wolters, a computer expert in California, sent him a program he had developed called the Equalizer, which allowed Hawking to select words from the screen. He thought he would be unable to finish his book. With the support of his student Brian Waite, A Brief History of Time was published in 1988, September 2005. Saw the release of an abridged version of the original book. This version was updated to address the new issues that had arisen due to the further scientific development. One will encounter a multitude of paradoxes in the book. In science and with people, things are often not what they seem, and pieces that ought to fit together refuse to do so. You will learn that beginnings may be endings, cruel circumstances can lead to happiness, although fame is success may not. 2 great scientific theories taken together seem to give us nonsense. Empty space is not empty. Black holes are not black. And a man whose appearance inspires shock and pity takes us laughing toward the boundaries time and space ought to be, but are not. It is of course a miracle that Hawking has been able to achieve everything he has. However, when you experience his intelligence and humor, you begin to take his unusual mode of communication and his obviously catastrophic physical problems no more seriously than he seems to himself. This is exactly the way he wants it. He chooses to ignore the difficulty and he expects others to adopt the same attitude. Underline it. Stephen Hawking has overcome his crippling disease to become the supernova of world physics.
Welcome back. Now, say your opinion. Yes, never ever judge a person by his or her appearance. Now, be familiar with some difficult words. First one, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. Second one, executor. Third one, impediment. Fourth one, precarious. Fifth one, slipshod. activity type. Take your textbook, page number 24. Be familiar with timeline. So write the timeline of Stephen Hawking from birth to death. Next activity, page number 25. Be familiar with profile. What all points we need to include in a profile. And third activity, interview question and answer. So with this, I am concluding today's class, and share this video with whom you think are in need of it. So thank you.